Hello and welcome back to the Second Chance to Live channel here on YouTube. I'm happy to see that you decided to watch this presentation. In today's presentation, I'm going to be sharing an article that I wrote back in February of this year, the end of February. To read the article, I'll bring it up. I create video presentations of my articles for individuals to learn better through listening and watching, as we all learn in different ways. Here's the article. Making our lives magical after a brain injury and stroke. Living with the impact of a brain injury, traumatic or acquired, can leave the individual with a feeling of helplessness. Helpless with the thinking that their lives are over and they no longer matter to anyone, including themselves. So what's the point? In the process of their feeling powerless to do anything different, the individual may develop what is called a learned helplessness. In the process, they may begin to believe that they are stuck, believing that they are a victim of life. Here's the definition of being magical: extremely or extraordinarily pleasant, enjoyable, or exciting. And that's by Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Here's a quote that I wrote. In my experience, I've found that it is not as important as what's happened to us or happens to us as how we respond to what happened or happens to us. How I learned helplessness occurs, and I use the illustration of the Pike syndrome. In this, a large aquarium tank is filled with water. A pane of glass is placed in the tank near one end of the tank. A big fish is released into the water at that end of the tank. At the other end of the tank, on the other side of the pane of glass in the tank, little fish are introduced into the tank. A pane of glass separates the big fish from the little fish. In an interest to get to the food source, little fish, the big fish repeatedly hits the pane of glass. Over time, the big fish begins to associate pain with trying to get to the little fish. After a period of such conditioning, the pane of glass is removed, separating the big fish from the little fish. Although the big fish can now readily get to the little fish, the food source, because of the conditioning associated with trying to get to the little fish pain, the big fish gives up. The learned helplessness results in the big fish starving to death. The pane of glass, disappointment, and discouragement. As individuals living with brain injuries and strokes, and many times with invisible disabilities, we can feel like the big fish in the big tank, a big fish that is trying to get to the little fish to find satisfaction and fulfillment. Satisfaction and fulfillment by achieving our hopes and dreams, yet continue to hit disappointment and discouragement. So making our lives magical by not giving up because of the pain in our lives. Making our lives magical one day at a time by realizing that we have more power than we realize. Realize that we no longer have to or need to feel helpless. That living with a brain injury and stroke does not have to leave us feeling as though we have no other choice or choices. That we are trapped like victims of our set of circumstances. So overcoming a learned helplessness. The good news is that we do not have to be limited or be dissuaded by the pain of a diagnosis or a prognosis. Like the big fish, we can learn to swim freely. Swim freely to go after what we need to do to improve the quality of our lives, well-beings, and relationships. Swim freely to discover what works for us. The pane of glass, the pane of glass of our or other people's expectations that can lead us to feeling helpless by focusing on our limitations. So using the word pain as with the glass between the big fish and little fish, and pain as between us, the expectations that we might have of ourselves and other people may have of us. So although we have limitations, our capacity to thrive is limitless. The pain of our disappointment and discouragement is only an indication that we need to try something different to get different results. By learning to use our gifts, talents, and abilities in ways that work for us, we are able to move from behind a feeling of being limited to an assurance that we are limitless or being limitless. An assurance that we are limitless by finding a way that will work for us, a way that will make our lives, well-beings, and relationships magical, a way that will no longer leave us feeling limited because of our limitations, in a way that will enhance our ability to live and thrive limitless beyond our brain injury, to be able to move from feeling limited to feeling limitless. In my experience, I needed to stop denying and defending what I was powerless to change. I needed to grieve the impact of my brain injury to begin to create and make my life magical. I needed to confront my and other people's denial, be angry about what I couldn't change, try to change what I couldn't change, and then become depressed at what I couldn't change, the impact of my brain injury. I needed to accept that I could no longer change what I could no longer change, to be able to see that I had other choices. So I went through a period of awareness to acceptance and then got into action, which allowed me to realize I had choices that would give me permission to explore beyond my deficits and limitations, choices that would open the door to help me to realize that I could get into action in order to be able to stop feeling limited or helpless. Start seeing my set of circumstances in a different way. In the process, I was able to start seeing my set of circumstances in a different way. Start seeing them through the lens of why not me instead of why me. Through the lens of what is instead of through the lens of what is not. In the process, I was able to stop focusing on what I was powerless to change. In the process, I was able to stop focusing on the symptoms, limitations, and deficits of my brain injury, setting goals and creating a magical way of life after brain injury and stroke. Through using the principles of neuroplasticity and repetitive mirror movements, we were able to achieve what we never dreamed possible, working on one skill at a time and repeating that skill a bazillion times. We achieved milestones. As we were able to combine the skills and skill sets together, we are able to create magic, create a magical life for ourselves by involving who we are in our ongoing brain injury recovery process. So what I mean by who we are is it involves our body, mind, spirit, soul, and emotions. All of those things are important for us to work on as we recover from our brain injury and stroke or any other issue that we might have in our lives, to be able to grieve it, to be able to get to the acceptance and then into the action stage. So advocating for ourselves in mind, body, spirit, soul, and emotions, through being and staying committed to the process of developing what makes who we are, makes us who we are, we can enhance our lives, well-beings, and relationships by developing our mind, body, spirit, soul, and emotions in our ongoing brain injury recovery process. We're able to learn to thrive and make our lives magical. Through being committed to an ongoing holistic recovery process, we can cultivate skills and skill sets that empower our ability to create a magical life for ourselves. In the process, we enhance our gifts, talents, and abilities in our lives. In the process, we are able to be of maximum service to a loving God and to other people. In the process, we become wounded healers because we become more aware. And then we can have empathy, which is different than sympathy. And sympathy is, oh, you poor thing. Empathy is, I understand because I've been through it myself. And that's what helps us to come out of hiding and out of isolation and from feelings of helplessness and powerlessness and feeling alienated from other people. There are 12 ways to advocate for a magical way of life after brain injury and stroke, and I developed these 12 ways. Through seeking to make my life magical despite my limitations, I discovered a set of ways that helped and continue to help me to create a magical life and create magic in my life, well being and relationships. Create magic in my life as I grow in my awareness, practice acceptance, and am able to get into action. And this is a process. I become aware of things as I go along, and I've been going through my own recovery process now for 56 years after my brain injury. So it just, life is a learning process. So the benefits that I've gained through working the 12 ways that help me to identify what works, does not work, and gets in the way of making life magical. These 12 ways have helped me to be able to accept the things that I cannot change the things I can, and let go of the rest to a loving God to help to sort out, to fulfill my purpose, and to be of service. These set of ways also help me to break free from a feeling of helplessness, powerlessness, and a sense of alienation from myself and other people. Helpless because of the impact of my brain injury, my invisible disability, and my set of circumstances. Working the 12 ways have helped me in the following ways. Working the 12 ways may also help you in these ways too. Learn to trust the process, loving God and myself by grieving what I could not change, changing to the things I can, creating my new normal, defining success for myself, finding and living my purpose, owning my power to be of service, developing my brain-body connection, advocating for myself in my mind, body, spirit, soul, and emotions, creating a healthy relationship with myself, a loving God and other people, understanding why I feel misunderstood and shunned to find freedom, grieving the guilt and shame of my brain injury, invisible disability, and stroke if I have one. I do not have one, but I would encourage you to grieve the guilt and shame maybe of your stroke that limits you to be able to do things that other people may want you to do. And so I can creating and continuing to develop my own genius, my own unique genius. And the quote that I share a lot, is everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And then discovering how to make my life magical one day at a time. And this too is a process as I discover and understand myself in relationships to myself, to my relationships, and to the God of my understanding. And by working these 12 steps, I was able to stop fighting with and against myself. And as a result, I was able to begin opening the door to hope a little at a time. So the 12 ways explain and creating a magical life after a brain injury. So what I do, I have these 12 ways that I'll read to you. And before each way, I give my perspective of the way that I'm going to read. So here's the first one. When I reached a point in time when I could no longer defend or deny the impact of my brain injury and invisible disability, I began to grieve. Number one, I admitted that we are powerless over the impact and effects of our brain injury and invisible disability, that our lives have forever changed because of our brain injury. Although we are powerless over the impact of our brain injury and our invisible disability, we are not helpless. As a result, we no longer need to feel like a victim or that we are helpless to change because of our brain injury, invisible disability, and set of circumstances. Number two, and this is my perspective, by realizing that all my efforts to try to change what could not be changed, I surrendered. By surrendering, I became open and willing. Second way, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could help us to accept what we are powerless to change, the impact of our brain injury and our invisible disability. Consequently, we can rely on a power that many of us have found to be God. We can rely on a loving God to help us to stop sabotaging and undermining our lives, well-beings, and relationships by trying to not be impacted by a brain injury, which I tried for many years to not be affected by my brain injury, but I had to reach a point where I became sick and tired about being sick and tired, so that I could stop beating up on myself and I could start looking at these 12 ways in a realistic way. So we can then rely on a loving God to help us to accept ourselves and to create a good life for ourselves. Third step, through accepting my inability to change what I simply could not change, I made the decision to ask for help from a power greater. And this is the third way. With the awareness that we need this power in our lives, we can make a decision to ask Him to lead and guide our process and journey. We no longer have to figure things out on our own. Instead, we can ask Him to help us own our power as an individual living with a brain injury and an invisible disability. Own our power through what we can do, not what we can't do. Own our power, what is in our power to control in our mind, body, spirit, soul, and emotions in ways that will work for us a little at a time, one day at a time. The fourth way, my perspective, by asking for help, I began to examine patterns of what got in the way of my ability to create hope in my life, well-being, and relationships. And now the fourth way, with the help of a loving God, we begin to examine areas of our lives that no longer work for us, that undermine and sabotage our lives, our well-beings, and our relationships. With the help of a loving God, we can look for patterns such as defense mechanisms in which we strive to defend, answer, and explain what we cannot do. Patterns that keep you and I believing or feeling that we are a victim of our brain injury, our invisible disability, and our circumstances. Fifth way explained by me, as I examined what got in the way of my life, well-being, and relationships, I realized that I needed to learn how to trust. The fifth way, we no longer have to remain isolated, alienated because of what we are no longer able to accomplish because of our brain injuries. By admitting to ourselves, a loving God, and another person, a trusted friend, a mentor, what we are unable to accomplish, we can come out of the shadows of isolation and break free from feelings of alienation. Alienation from ourselves, a loving God, and other people, because of what we can no longer accomplish. By letting go of these expectations, we can learn how to trust again. A loving God, ourselves, and other people. Sixth way explained, by realizing that I needed to trust, I discovered that I needed to let go of what no longer worked for me to discover what works for me. Sixth way, through being sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired of getting the same results, we become willing to try something different. Become willing to try something different to get different results in our lives and relationships. Through being willing, we can ask a loving God to help us stop doing things that no longer work for us, doing things that get in the way and sabotage our ability to get on with creating good life for ourselves. In the process, we become entirely ready to let go of what no longer matters for us or what no longer works for us, so that we can find out what matters for us and what we can do. Seventh way described by me, to discover what would work for me, I needed to let go of my will to ask a loving God to lead, guide, and direct my discovery process. Seventh way, through being ready to let go of what no longer works for us, we can actively be involved. Actively be involved in the process of discovering how to use our gifts, talents, and abilities. Discovering how to use our gifts, talents, and abilities through trial and error. In the process, we can create and find ways to use and fit to use our gifts, talents, and abilities in ways that will work for us. We can humbly ask a loving God to help us with the process of self-discovery. In the process of letting go and self-discovery, we can find and have experience. We can have and experience peace in our lives and our relationships. Eighth way, explained by me. By examining the patterns of what no longer works for me as I live my life, I am able to make peace with what no longer works for me. Eighth way. Through letting go of what no longer works, we can pursue what works for us. In the process, we can stop being a prisoner of our deficits and limitations instead of trying to not be impacted by our deficits and limitations. We can accept them. As we are able to stop fighting against ourselves and other people by trying to prove that we no longer have those deficits and limitations. As we stop fighting with our deficits and limitations, we gain the freedom to run our own race. In the process, we become the individuals that we choose to become and decide to become in our lives. The ninth way, explained by me, I am able to make peace with what no longer works with me in my life, well-being, and relationships by changing the way I use my energy. Ninth way, we can let go of the life that we have planned to create with the life that works for us. In the process, we can learn how to use and own our power in our mind, body, spirit, and emotions. Own our power through the use of our time and energy. In the process, we can create our new normal in ways that will work for us, in ways that will work for us through being an advocate for our mind, body, spirit, soul, and emotions. And it's really important to realize that, you and I need to do the active work. We can involve God in the process, and we can involve trusted people, mentors, sponsors, whoever you might be working with. You can invite them to be along the journey, but unless you do the work, as I've heard, if nothing changes, nothing changes. The 10th way. As I seek to change the way that I interact in my life and relationships, I continue to be aware of what no longer works for me each day, the 10th way. And the good news is that we don't have to figure out how to do everything and how everything will fit together perfectly. Fit together as we seek to own our power in our mind, body, spirit, soul, and emotions. Instead, we can take the process one day at a time, one step at a time. In the process, we can ask a loving God to guide, lead, and direct our steps one day at a time. In the process, we can trust the process. Trust that the dots will connect forward as we learn to use our gifts, talents, and abilities. The 11th step, explained by me, or 11th way, because I realize that brain injury recovery is an ongoing process, I ask a loving God to guide, lead, and direct my process each day. So I invite God in. The 11th way, we can ask a loving God to give us direction each day. We can do the footwork while letting go of the outcomes by trusting the process, the loving God and ourselves. We can learn to trust through doing the footwork and letting go of the outcomes. We can let go of the outcomes one day at a time. We can trust that more will be revealed with time. We can ask and trust that we are being guided in the direction of fulfilling our purpose to be of service. So By doing this on a daily basis, I invite God in and I ask Him to guide, lead, and direct my steps. And as a result, I just trust that the dots are going to connect forward, that He's using all things together for my good, and that I can trust Him and trust the process. And here, the 12th way, as I understand, as I continue to ask your loving God to lead, guide, and direct my process, in ways that work for me, I encourage others to do the same. So I carry a message of hope. So the 12th way. As we grow in the understanding of ourselves with the help of a loving God, we continue to use our gifts, talents, and abilities. Use our gifts, talents, and abilities in ways that will work for us. In the process, we learn from our circumstances, our experiences, our lessons, and opportunities. In the process, we create hope in our lives, well being, and relationships. In the process, we create our destinies, one lesson, one opportunity, and one day at a time. In the process, we share hope with other individuals who are living with a brain injury or a stroke to not give up. To not give up because more will be revealed to us in time. And below this, I have a series of quotes that I will go through. Quotes to encourage you and me to make our lives magical. Every strike brings me closer to the next home run by Babe Ruth. Inch by inch, life's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's very hard by John Braithwaite. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment by Jim Rohn. Regardless of your lot in life, you can build something beautiful on it by Zig Ziglar. I've not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work by Thomas Edison. As long as man stands in his way, everything seems to be in his way by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The most common way people give away their powers by thinking they don't have any, Alice Walker. The goals give you the mark to shoot for and keep you motivated when you face adversity by Benjamin Watson. There's only one corner of the universe that you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self by Aldous Huxley. Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid by Albert Einstein. In my experience, I've found that it is not as important as what happened or happens to me, but how I respond to what happens to me by Craig J. Phillips, MRCBA. When one door of happiness, another door opens, but so often we look at the closed door that we do not see the one that has been opened for us by Helen Keller. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. And that again is by Helen Keller. And then the final quote, if you advance confidently in the direction of your dreams and endeavor to live the life that you have imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. And then below this, I have links to my resources, which you can find on Second Chance to Live. And then a detailed explanation about my journey and process, Second Chance to Live, author's autobiography, and bullet point. This is the end of the presentation. I want to thank you again for coming and listening to this presentation. Before I go, let me encourage you with this. Please do not give up on yourself, a loving God, or yourself, because more will be revealed to you in time. The pieces of the puzzle will come together in the correct order and at the right time. So be encouraged, my friend. More will be revealed to you and to me. Have a great day, and God bless both you and your family. Bye now.